Amnesia. Story by Erica Limones. Read by Ray La Voz. It was a terrible car accident. The driver of a black SUV was left unconscious. The second vehicle held 3 passengers. 2 of them, a man and a woman, a newlywed couple, were seriously injured. They embraced each other, praying that help would come soon. The 4th victim was not so fortunate. 5 minutes passed, and the 3 survivors were quickly transferred to the nearest hospital. The days passed, and the couple recuperated. The man was the first to be discharged from the hospital 2 weeks after the accident, but he stayed by his wife's side 7 more days until she too could go home. But the man from the black vehicle would still not wake up. The nurse that was taking care of him could see that among his belongings was a driver's license that stated his name, John Simpson, 40 years old. He was an American citizen from Memphis, Tennessee. His wallet didn't have a lot to say, and his few belongings didn't supply enough information to locate a family member in the city. The only hope was that one day John would wake up and tell his story. For the time being, it was all a mystery waiting to be solved. 4 weeks passed, and on one Thursday morning, John finally awakened from his coma, in which he had been deeply asleep. But the medical staff soon discovered that it was impossible for John to remember who he was. He had awakened with amnesia. The doctor explained that the memory has its own rhythm and that, little by little, it begins to recuperate. "But you have to be patient," said the doctor. "Memories often return in no specific order." After carefully explaining the situation, the doctor gave him a card. "Call me if you have any problems, or if you get lost," he said with a slight smile. And just like that, John left to wander the streets, with only his driver's license, the only document that stated his name. He tried not to worry about his situation, perhaps because meditation on the subject would be too much to bear. He kept walking without any particular course. He arrived at a train station and sat down for a while to clear his mind. John observed the passers-by with a faint hope of finding a familiar face. But besides the familiar feeling of time passing, nothing else brought back memories. He could see a little boy holding an ice cream cone in his hand. John amused himself watching the child enjoy his treat. But all of a sudden, he saw 2 men staring at him intensely, a bit of a distance away. "Why do they stare at me like that?" He became nervous. It was as if his entire body begged him to get out of that place, and he didn't entirely understand the reason why he felt that way. For an instant, their gazes met. The men didn't move a muscle. It looked like they were waiting for John's reaction. He followed his instincts and started leaving. That was the signal that the men were waiting for to follow him. They began to pick up their pace, and seconds later, they began running after him. Without thinking twice, John disappeared into the crowd and managed to escape to a plaza that was 3 streets away from the train station. Why are these men following me? Who am I? What type of trouble am I in? He thought to look meticulously through his wallet, his only identifier, to see if he could find a clue. After searching for a few minutes, he found a small piece of paper with an address and 3 simple words that read, "Ask for Alan." He did all he could to not draw attention to himself. It wasn't easy, but he finally found the address. But now, the fear of the unknown threatened to overtake him, but his distress was surpassed by his curiosity, and even more so, his need to survive. So he mustered up the necessary courage to knock on that door. The small figure of a man that answered the door wasn't exactly intimidating, but his blunt manner wasn't friendly either. Alan asked for identification, and John handed it over without saying a word. After the man verified the document, he proceeded to make a baffling statement. "It's all ready." He immediately got out a suitcase and showed John his new passport with a lot of money and a plane ticket to Germany. He explained that his last mission as an undercover agent had been a big success and that triumph had won him his freedom. John couldn't believe what he was hearing, but he kept silent. When he left the man's house, he got rid of his old license, throwing it into a trash bin. He bought dark glasses and cut his hair. He then headed to the airport and awaited his flight, drinking a coffee while hiding behind a newspaper in order to not draw attention. A few hours passed and his flight arrived. He boarded the plane, sat down, and exhausted from the journey, he fell asleep in his chair. In the midst of his deep sleep, some fragments of his past began to surface. He was being followed, and just when he thought himself safe aboard a train, new enemies arose who didn't plan to leave him alive. He was forced to jump from the train, which was rolling at full speed, in order to save himself. The turbulence of the plane shook him, and he awoke, sweaty and dazed from what he could barely remember from a tumultuous past. He looked at the clouds outside of the window, and with them, he calmed himself, knowing that he now had new horizons ahead of him.